Hello, I'm Steph from iDriver Classic, and today I'm here with this incredible Triumph 2000 Mark II from 1971. Now, when Triumph brought it to market, they brought out a rather sumptuous brochure to go with it. And in the brochure, they said there's only two types of motorists, those that have driven the Triumph 2000 and those who have not. And they said, if you or I have not, you really need to understand what it's all about. So in today's video, with the help of the brochure and my friends that are filming, I'm going to be showing you this Triumph 2000, walking you through it, showing you up close and personal, giving you a wee bit of history as well, and then taking you out for a drive. If you've noticed I can't stop smiling, that's because I've driven it here, and this is by far one of my most favourite vehicles already. So I hope I can do it some justice. But before any of that, let's have a message about our channel sponsor.
iDriver Classic is proud to be sponsored by Bidding Classics Auctions, who this week have some really tasty treats up for grabs, including this Maltese Mark II Mini Clubman, which is in lovely original condition and hasn't really been messed around with, and this awesome 205 Cabriolet, which is one of those cars that you could use and enjoy or squirrel away as a bit of an investment. Bidding ends 30th of July and there's a link in the description box below.
To set the scene for you contextually, the Triumph 2000 came to market in the autumn of 1963. The P6, which is a key homegrown rival, had been released the week prior, and the automotive world was abuzz with these fantastic new mid-sized motors. Now, this particular car, the Triumph 2000, was styled by Michelotti, which is a name you'll have heard many a time if you're a fan of Triumph. He did so many amazing things, and he's definitely worth a Google if you haven't heard about him before. And the car was available in the UK, where it was made in Coventry in the West Midlands, and across the world in commonwealth locations like Australia and New Zealand, alongside countries where Triumph proved to be popular, like Belgium. I believe it was available in South Africa as well, but I don't think it was called the Triumph 2000. Now, sales of the Mark I were high, went down really well, and the car was popular with many buyers, if for no other reason that at first the key competitor, the P6, had launched with a 4-cylinder engine against the 6-cylinder offered by Triumph. Now, it'd be very remiss of me not to mention all the other competitors, because remember, Triumph wasn't just competing at this point, because this is the point where you start tipping into people being a little bit more open to European and Japanese motoring. So you've got competitors coming in from Japan, which aren't the biggest of threats, but you've got other key competitors on the European stage, cars like the DS, the BMW 2000. There's lots of different cars that it was coming up against, so it really had to wow. Now, with sales high and public perception strong, Triumph decided to bring the Mark II to market. But here's the thing, because they learnt a key lesson from the Vanguard. The Vanguard, like the 2000, had been a popular motor back in the day, but realistically, Triumph had rested on their laurels and they'd let the car run on without intervention of modern tweaks, and it meant that when it hit the end of production, it looked really tired, really lacklustre and completely out of touch with what people wanted, which not only impacted the vehicle's reputation, but that of Triumph as well. And I think one of the greatest things that Triumph did was they listened and they learnt from that. But here's the thing, there was a bigger issue at heart, because in 1968, British Leyland is born, essentially, and it now means that these once completely separate UK rivals, the Rover P6 and the Triumph 2000, now both sit under the same roof. This then means that any sales of one or the other cannibalise from each other, and so there's a bit of a reticence in-house to spend too much to take the Mark II where it needs to go. But here's the thing, the Triumph team aren't really entirely happy with that, so they think, well, what can we do to get around that? Well, they take the key learnings from the Stag and they then apply it to the 2000 Mark II, which really impacted everything from how it looked through to how it's all modernised for the next generation. And if you're wondering what they changed on the Mark II, some of the upgrades included things like bigger disc brakes, bigger servo, wider track and wheel trims, the new fascia, the new adjustable steering column, which I'll talk to you about later because we're not going to be demoing that today, the dipping mirror, the redesigned seats, the alternator, the luggage space in the back, which was an incredible 15 cubic feet of space. And remember, this is coming up against stuff from Ford as well, because you've got things like the Granada out in the market, and again I think that had 14 feet cubic space in the boot. So they're looking at all the stuff that's available at market, and they're really doing something special with this. You get the fully reclined seats, which again I found quite difficult, so I'm not going to be able to demo those for you today. what else did you get? You got the breathable vinyl or the brushed nylon interior, the new rotary light switch, everything which apparently was redesigned to fall naturally to hand or eye. And then you've got 3 transmission options. You've got the automatic, the manual, or the manual with the overdrive, the raised compression ratio for livelier acceleration and more power, a 34-foot turning circle, which was 4 turns, lock to lock, 100 mph top speed, and 0 to 60 in 13.6 seconds. Oh, and if you're wondering if that lock you spotted on the front wing is some sort of optional extra or something they put in for the Mark II, it's not. It's just a period alarm or immobiliser that someone fitted many moons ago but now isn't in use. Of the 2002 litre we're testing here today, which was the market entry at this point because of course you've got the 2.5 etc, there were just over 100,000 made between 1969 and when it came to end of production in 1977. The car did really well and it was highly thought of across the globe, even in Australia where I know that they did have some problems, and I know some people probably comment that they did tend to overheat and get vapour lock. Now in New Zealand they were so popular that even the Prime Minister had one, and he had a 2500S. The cars also entered the 1970 London to Mexico World Cup Rally and they placed 2nd and 4th. Essentially, the car did really well across all its different platforms. Now, they might have had their problems occasionally, but the 2000 was a great car. And in my opinion, it's a real travesty that Triumph and Rover got put under the same umbrella with British Leyland. I think it meant that the 2000 just didn't become what it should have been in the future, but instead, on paper, Rover won. And what happens then is BL look at the lineup for both Rover and Triumph and they replace it with the SD1, which in itself is a lovely car, but not quite the special car, which is the Triumph 2000. Now, come on, let's jump in the passenger seat and have a look at this dash. Now, coming inside here, I'm sure you'll agree with me that not only is it incredibly sumptuous and spacious, and in fact, in the brochure, I think it's described as, and it makes me cringe saying it, a civilised car for civilised people. What they're essentially getting at is it's a really luxury car and it's for the creme de la creme. And quite often you get in cars from this era and they haven't actually aged that well. But this one for me, I truly believe with my entire heart that this is aged very well. Now I know there's a few little bits and this is no slight to the owner at all because it's not his fault. But you tend to find with a lot of these vinyl top dashes that they've cracked. This one has, sadly, but look, she's over 50 years old. She's lived a life and these things have happened. We've got 69,000 on the clock. It's been used. Now coming over here, this is the glove box. Now as we open it up and you've got this, I think it was described as walnut trim, although it doesn't look very walnut, it just looks like wood. And when you open it up, you look inside, you've got your great size glove box there with your handbook. And then you look at the rest of the dash and you think, yes, it's laid out really well. And that's something they point out to you in the brochure as well, because apparently everything should be within, this is essentially like easy reach, so you can reach everything, or it's within easy eye contact. And it truly is. I'm not, apart from that glove box, which I don't need to use whilst I'm driving, I'm not having to lean for anything. Now coming into the centre here, you've got your vents. You come down from there, you've got your heater control, you've got your cigarette lighter, you've got your choke, coming down into your radio and all your heater panel there. It all feels relatively sturdy. Even these little dials on here, though, they are quite stiff. Now coming in front of us, this feels deliciously familiar because a lot of these controls are the same. Of course, it is Triumph as my 1300 front wheel drive. Now over on the left hand side, I've got one of my favourite features in a car, which is a clock. Coming into this gauge, which is split into 3, and I love when they do this. You've got your temperature, you've got your voltmeter, and you've got your fuel gauge there as well. Now in the middle, you'll see this control panel. And a lot of people don't know what this is called, but this is called your all systems go wheel. Although when you look at the brochures for these at the time, Triumph don't call it that anymore. They just call it I think they just call it the warning light wheel, or they just refer to it as a gauge with all the warning lights in. But that tells you everything from your oil lights, whether you've got high beam on, ignition warning light, whether your fuel is low, the handbrake and the choke, and your indicators as well. And the greatest thing is I've been flicking through and looking at all of these and I've been told that all the lights work, so great stuff. Over on the right hand side, you've got a speedo and a trip clock. It is so nicely laid out. I probably can't convey that very well in a video, but it is glorious. Now, to turn your headlights on, this is something new that they put in, and they really upsold this as a selling point. This is how you change your headlights. Now, for me, this is not brittle, but it feels quite notchy as you move it round. I'm not sure I particularly like that, and that's probably one of my only criticisms of the entire car, because it's one of my favourite that I've tested this year. In terms of your stalks, over on your left hand side you've got 2-speed wipers, and on the right hand side you've got your indicators and you've got your horn there as well. Oh, I would have thought that horn would have had more authority, but hey, we're not here for that. Now, coming into the centre here, you've probably noticed that we are not on a manual box. Now, the choices on these were, you had 3. So you've got the manual, you've got your manual with your overdrive, and then you've got your 3-speed auto. Now, I believe the box on these is the 3-speed 35 Borg-Warner auto box, but that's pretty standard because you see a lot of your cars from the 70s and I think the 60s as well with those Borg-Warner boxes in, so that's kind of really what I expected. And that's all your controls and everything that you've got there. You'll see when we go out driving, it is so lovely. Everything is going to be exactly where you expect it to be, and I hope that when we watch this you're going to be able to hear how quiet it is as well. And there's a couple of other bits that I want to talk to you about. So first of all, we've got the sunroof. And then we're not going to be opening that today. This is an original sunroof which was fitted at the time. Now, I have been warned or told that sometimes the sunroof has a mind of its own and it just pops open. So we'll see what happens when we go driving. Now, the other thing that I want to tell you about is these seats. Now, you'll notice that they're not trimmed in vinyl because there were 2 options at this stage. You could have gone for vinyl, which was described as the breathable vinyl, and it has those little holes in, so it's a bit like my Triumph 1300. And then this is called the Bry Nylon option. Now, if you're wondering what Bry Nylon is, the Bry bit stands for British, and essentially Bry Nylon was a fabric. It's a little bit like Crimpline, which is another British fabric of the time, and they did everything with Bry Nylon. And I know this because I own quite a lot of it myself. You can get everything from nighties to pillowcases to sheets. I mean, the static is endless. The reason they used Bry Nylon in here was because they said it kept you warm in the winter and cool in the summer. As somebody with a Bry Nylon dress or two, I can assure you that in the winter you're freezing and in the summer you are sweating like you're on trial. It's absolutely horrendous. In terms of seat material, it's a funny one because style-wise, it's absolutely beautiful. I love how the seats are put together. I love the finish on the fabric. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing, and they are incredibly comfortable. In terms of a fabric, to give you a bit of a tactile comparison, I would say fabric weight-wise, it's not much thicker than a typical man's shirt, which means that unfortunately these seats do wear through quite quickly. And the owner of this vehicle, who by the way has done lots and lots and lots on this car since buying it last year, he's got all sorts of controls working and he's got all sorts of bits working. One of the things was, he said to me that the driver's seat was pretty much knackered beyond repair, and he drove all the way from Birmingham to Norfolk, which is quite far if you're living abroad and you don't know where that is, to go and buy another seat for this beloved Triumph, and it's exactly the same colour and it's worn to exactly the same amount. Now, the other great thing about going for Bry Nylon over a more natural fabric like cotton or woven fabric is that it seems to fade less. And if you're wondering what the fade is on these seats, I decided to do a bit of a test, and I pulled down the back armrest and showed you, I'm just showing you that against the back seat there, so you can see that it's not really faded too badly and it's still incredibly bright. But what's it sound like? Well, when these came to market, and I keep trying to put the key in on that side, so apologies. When these came to market, they were sold as the only British car to be on sale with a 2-litre 6-cylinder engine. So I'm going to start her up, you can have a listen. Don't worry, I'll put the seatbelt on before we drive away. Check we're in park. I don't know if you can hear that, but nothing rattles. Oh, tell you what, that's a novelty in a British car from this era. Have a listen from the back end and we'll go out on a drive. Right, let's go on an adventure. Now I'm going to have to confess something. I recorded the in section, you know, where I taught you through the dash and stuff. Recorded it a few times, so I can't remember if I've told you that the top speed on this is 100 miles an hour and it's 0 to 60 in 13.6 seconds. But if I haven't, that's what it is. Now as we cruise on down, I think one of the things that becomes immediately apparent, apart from the fact that it's rather quiet inside, which is only marred by the fact that I can hear there's a bit of wind coming from up here somewhere from the sunroof. It is remarkably quiet for a car of this era. And one of the loveliest things about this is, and you're getting quite a lot of cars from the 60s and 70s, and to really get them up to, well, above 60, you're having to push them, or at least put your foot down a wee bit. With this, not so. It cruises along so comfortably that your foot feels like it's barely touching the pedal. In terms of the driving experience, you could have paid extra and had power steering fitted to these, which isn't something that someone's chosen to do on this. However, I think it would have been to the slight benefit of whoever was driving it and owning it at the time, because the one thing that I did notice was I had to manoeuvre out of that car park that we filmed in earlier, and it's 4 turns lock to lock, 34 feet turning circle, and you really felt it. You did need some muscle in your upper arms to get it round, so it's quite heavy at a low speed, but bear in mind it's a big old car. You're not just pivoting a Fiat 500 round in a small space. But that slightly laborious turning circle is a small price to pay for how much room you've got inside, because as you can see, you spread your arms right out, you've got room for not only yourself, but you've got really great room in the back for your passengers. And that for me is a really nice plus point, because quite often with a 60s and 70s car you chuck people in the back and their experience isn't quite as good as yours because they can't fit their legs in. But in this, not so. Now as we cruise along, we've got this auto box. Now I'm sure you can probably hear that it changes through those 3 speeds quite easily. It doesn't feel like it's strained even when you're getting above kind of that 50-60 mark, which means that I can already tell you now that even though we're not going to touch any motorways today, I don't think a motorway driving experience would be too much if you were going for an auto. As you can see, as we come around the corners, you're not really having to put too much in to get it round. So it really is a case of it's only at those lower speeds where you're feeling that need, where that power steering might be advantageous for ownership. In terms of your radio, if you've got one fitted, it's lovely. Just look, everything about this driving experience is really nice. And although you do slightly hear it when you go down the potholes, we arrived today in a 2000s MG and that sounded louder than this. So I just think, well, you know what? For the time and how it's aged and against the competition as well, I think it's a fine vehicle indeed. I've driven a P6, I've been out in P6s quite a lot, but which is better? Well, I find the auto change, because I've been out in an automatic P6 and then I've been out in this, which is of course an automatic, and I found that the gear change in the P6 and the automatic, I preferred that. This feels quite notchy, marching through the box, and I mean, you know, you're in drive most of the time, aren't you, so you don't feel it, but when you're flipping into reverse or you're going into park, that's when you really think, I would like it if it was a little bit smoother. But these are all very small criticisms indeed for what is a car that I feel has held up very well through the decades that it's been on the road. I would really like to take out a manual to see how it performs in comparison to this, but overall I'm just going to turn that heater off actually. It's really weird. We've for anyone not in the UK, we've had an absolutely belting heat wave lately, and now it's it's been quite overcast today and it's quite chilly actually. So that's pretty much everything. In terms of your seating position as well, I kind of need to talk about that, don't I? As someone who is only 5'3", the only thing I would urge caution is I think if you were shorter than perhaps 5 foot, you might really struggle to drive this, because I've got the seat pushed forward as far as you can. I did also mean to tell you when we were looking around the inside of the car that you have got an adjustable steering column. The reason I haven't demonstrated that today is because, look, the car's over 50 years old and unfortunately is seized, and it's one of those jobs that needs sorting out. But realistically, if you're happy with where the steering column is, it doesn't need changing too much, which is probably why it's not as amiable as it maybe was back in the day. But that does move as well, so you can adjust your seating position up. I'm just going to put my foot down so you can see it a little bit more. So as you can see there, look, we're coming up, it's 50. I would like to test a manual actually, because I do think perhaps it would have a little bit more get up and go when you put your foot down. But look, very small criticisms indeed. I absolutely adore this car. It's one of my favourite things I've tested. I love the seating position. I love the fact I can see to the end of the bonnet. I've got amazing visibility all round. I've had a fantastic afternoon out with this wondrous Triumph 2000. If you're the lucky owner of one of these, I envy you greatly and hope to join you in ownership at some point in the next 2 years, because I'm utterly smitten. And if you're watching this at home and you're one of the have-nots that have never driven one, please, for goodness sakes, try and get the passenger seat in one, try and get the driver's seat one. They are absolutely glorious. Now, until next Sunday when we're looking at something completely different, take care and drive safely.